about an hour or less, depending on how this goes. No opposition, so we'll film this. The film will be on our website when the endorsement package comes out, which is next Wednesday, right?
Correct.
And so we're here for the benefit of our listeners and readers, and so if we cut you off or redirect you, it's not because we're rude, it's just because we want to get a lot of questions answered so we can be as prepared as possible. Why don't we start by just having you tell us, maybe Tom, if you would start by telling us what the measure does, how much money it raises, and highlights of...
Sure. So it's
And introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Tom Curler, I'm chair of the school board. And this measure is a $790 million bond that would fully modernize and rebuild 3 high schools and 1 middle school completely, and address the urgent health and safety needs of our district. So everybody knows about the lead crisis, and we, I think, turned it into an opportunity, kind of canary in the coal mine, and did a full assessment of the health and safety, neurotoxins, cancer-causing agents across the district. And so there would be 150 million at least going into that, and specifically
150 going into what?
To the health and safety, and so specifically all the lead out of the water, that would do that. All the lead paint, exposed chipping lead paint would be taken care of. All the exposed asbestos would be taken care of. All the radon issues would also be taken care of. In addition to that, fire and safety would be addressed, roofs, security systems, and ADA.
So could you tell us how the schools that were selected for rebuild or renovation were selected?
Part of the comprehensive plan and a committee process, community process. So the first 3 were Franklin Roosevelt and Grant. And there was a committee back in 2012-13 that wrestled with the next 3, and which the high schools. And the notion is that the high schools would be the best to do at first. Covers the most amount of students each area cluster would get improvements. And so Lincoln, which is extremely overcrowded, Benson, which is practically falling down, and Madison, which is in need of help in East County as well, or East Portland. And then through the DBRAC process and redistricting and looking at configurations going back to middle schools, it was very evident that the east side needed a middle school, and Kellogg was sitting there ready to be rebuilt. So that was a board decision that Kellogg added.
So are the schools that are going to be fixed or rebuilt or renovated this time, are they the schools that are in most need of repair?
From a health and safety perspective.
Yes, so health and safety perspective is the most cost-effective health and safety thing that we can do is rebuild schools. So in that respect, yes, but there are others that are out there. So it was a combination of health and safety and enrollment issues. So I mean, I think it was taking all those things into consideration.
Did you create a list of the health and safety concerns ranked?
Did you like, my understanding from back when there was a process last summer for considering a bond for November is that the staff asked the bond subcommittee of the board, should we do a full analysis of which schools are the most dangerous or have the most health and safety code problems? And that the board's direction to the staff was not to do that.
So the question would be why not?
Well, I don't recall that. Do you want to?
Yeah, I can chime in. I
Yeah.
mean, the question at the time during the summer, we started looking at purely health and safety first. How can we stabilize the organization and make sure that the most problematic issues, period, not necessarily schools, that need to be addressed. And lead in the water, lead in paint, radon, they were on the top of the list. These are issues, challenges that are very visible and we were dealing with. So these were identified as high risk area. And our schools are dated and old. I mean, they were built on average most of our schools about 77 years on average. That's how old they are. They're built between 1908 and 1928. So lead in the paint and lead in the water due to deterioration in the pipes, etc. That was very clear is a big problem we have in the district. So our concern and our focus was on addressing health and safety, period, regardless of which school. And lead, whether it's paint or water or radon, these are across the district. There is not one school probably that doesn't have paint issue because of the age of the building. And that's true probably for the water. So that was part of our assessment. So when we're addressing in the bond, we are addressing all schools when it comes to lead, whether it's paint or water or radon. Then we made a comprehensive assessment in terms of health and safety. And we looked at all the health and safety programs, which is, whether it's asbestos, ADA, seismic, fire and safety, water, playground, theater, auditoriums, etc. And based on that, we rank them. And we rank them based on risk. What's the potential or likelihood they happen, and how many people will be affected, etc. Then we ran that by a community group. And the community group convened over 3 different meetings. And based on these meetings, we came up with the final list and the dollar amount that's allocated to every category. So it's not necessarily based on school, it's based on risk that we determined the $150 million. And I would add to that, when Tom spoke about the modernization, we know from experience about 30% of the work spent on modernization addresses health and safety, because that's significant amount of seismic, significant amount of ADA, significant amount of work that is going in schools to address many of the concerns related to health and safety, in addition to the fact that it will provide a better 21st century kind of environment for our kids and for our staff. So that adds another significant dollar amount. And when you look at the dollar amount allocated in modernization plus the 150, that's about $340 million technically that we're allocating out of the 790 toward the health and safety.
But the health and safety assessment, I mean, the assessment you provided as part of the board packet.
Correct.
Did not analyze Lincoln, Madison, and Benson as part of that.
We looked at risks. So what we did, we have taken a sample. We couldn't do every single school within a few months. We've done a sampling of schools, and we relied on data that we have had from our experience of issues that we have had with the schools. Then we brought in experts to do cost estimates, and that's how we came up with the dollar. In terms of which school we do first, that's going to come later, and we have already started a project to do facility condition index. We've done one back in 2012. We will update that, which include every single school. So we will walk every single school, and we will have all conditions, not just health and safety. And at that moment, that will help guide the prioritization and which school will be addressed first with the health and safety, the $150 million.
So Yusuf, in the most recent outside audit of the 2012 bond,
Yes.
there's significant discussion of the Franklin cost overruns. Could you talk about that, please?
You know, we have had, I believe we added somewhere in the, I think 50 or 60,000 square feet to the projects, just because after the bond was approved, there were changes and additions that
Right.
took place. They're good changes, good additions in order to provide a better enhanced environment for our kids and for our staff in schools. Having said that, while there are some challenges and there are some cost increases, as far as the bond package as a whole, I mean, a lot of these overruns, they have been taken out of contingencies.
Right.
They ran into bedrock, like 20 feet of bedrock that was not anticipated, which is the major cost.
It was a guaranteed maximum contract originally, right, for $80-some million, and the final cost is over 110.
Because expanded scope primarily, and then these cost overruns.
So let me ask a global question.
Yeah.
What would your assessment be of how well the 2012 money was handled?
I would say that the implementation of the 2012 bond is close to extraordinary. If we are going to deliver what we promised the voters, and we're going to do it with the money that we asked the voters for.
So after yesterday's Oregonian story, somebody called me and said, gee, the fire story about the fire, life and safety, that after the 2012 bond, that there was about $600,000 spent at Franklin and about $1 million spent at Madison and at Benson, putting in new fire systems, fire detection systems. Is that correct?
As we rebuild the school,
That they were put in with 2012 bond money and will be essentially torn out with 2017 bond.
I'll have to check with our facility, but we did do about 50 different schools, projects, improvements around the district. These are necessary projects that we have to put in place to ensure that the health and safety for our kids is secured, and they have the, we don't want to put them in danger, obviously. So there were 52 number of schools that were put together. The specific question I'll have to check with our folks on.
And I want to go back to the question, because the 2012 was set up with a bond accountability committee,
Right.
and with outside audits that you've already mentioned. That those structures have provided incredible, have helped us get to where we are and establish this track record. And you should talk to, if you haven't already, the chair, Kevin Spellman, of that, who's just about as straight shooting as you can find.
Can I drill down a little bit into your costs here? And I apologize because the answers may be if I haven't got all the way to page 5, but in case I don't.
Which document are you in?
Well, let's start with Lincoln. So, no, let's not. Let's start with Madison.
They did not all have copies, so please.
Okay, so the difference between the project cost and the construction cost, is that because you got to relocate students, or explain what that difference is? You've got a construction cost of $95 million and a project cost of $145 million. So where is that $50 million spent?
You can go ahead.
Yeah, I can cover just broadly. I mean, Jerry would know a lot more about the details than I do. He's our chief modernization officer. But a big part of the cost is putting temporary space for the kids in order to stay in while we rebuild the schools. That's a big part of that. in addition to the project management and contingency and all.
But so if I just look at the construction cost of Madison, it's $95 million,
Yes.
right? And if I divide that into the proposed building area of 325,000, I come up with $655 a foot. Is that an accurate way to look at this?
Probably.
So, you know, I was involved in the construction of a high school about 8 years ago. 655 was more than 2.5 times the cost. Why is that so expensive? But don't answer that question yet, because if you go to Lincoln, and if I do the same math, it's $571 a foot. And if you go to Benson, it's $331 a foot. So why is there such a dissonance in the cost per foot of construction and renovation?
I honestly can't answer that question.
Well,
I'll
I
have
can
Jay try to do that.
Yeah, first of all, we can get back to you on that, but, and Taylor, you might want to talk about the design committees and your role there, but because each design committee, so Madison came up with a proposal that was different, obviously, different building. Some of Madison's not going to get, Lincoln most likely will be fully rebuilt. Madison is not going to be. So I don't know if you want to touch on.
So when we were sitting down, my name is Taylor Marrow. I was working on the Madison, I was the MPC to Madison program planning committee. I was the co-chair. I have a child that's in Madison right now, and I have a 10-year-old that I'll be feeding into Madison. So I've been really passionate about this. So when we were looking at it, right, a lot of it was about, from what I remember of the difference from the construction cost to the projected cost, are things like where are the oil tanks still buried under the ground if we have to get those removed? What are areas that might need to be leveled because Madison isn't necessarily on this level plane? So those were some of the discussions about why the projected cost might be a little bit over. Also, when we were talking about construction costs versus projected costs, we're dealing with where we are right now in Portland as far as increased construction, lack of contractors because of all the building that's going on.
Yeah, but that doesn't explain why one building is going to cost $655 a foot to build and the other one's going to cost $331.
Because they're different buildings. I mean, that's the short answer, and they're different renovation projects. But I think your numbers are, I think I'd like to get you more accurate numbers.
No, the numbers are your numbers, Tom.
No, I know, but
Are you saying your numbers are inaccurate?
no, but I mean, I think
Divide
there's
95 million. Here, I'll give you my calculator. Let's do the math right now. I mean, look,
Yeah.
the issue before this board is not whether or not there's a need. I mean, there's clearly a need. The issue is, at heart, the credibility of the district and in terms of its financial husbandry. So it seems appropriate for us to ask you questions about how carefully you looked at these dollars, and for you to respond by saying we're not quite sure why we've got $331 a foot and $655 a foot. It makes it difficult
So
for
maybe
us
I might
to
be able to
assess.
explain this. So when we were sitting down to talk about Madison, we have a very different structure of the high school than what Lincoln is or even what Benson is.
Right.
So that means we're talking about wider hallways that need to be built in the school. We're not doing a complete reno, so we're going to have to move things around within the building. So and once again, I can't speak because I'm not an economist, but these things all add to the cost internally of the building. When we were
Well, if
looking,
you're not increasing the footprint,
yeah.
wider hallways actually saves you money.
But then you have to deal with how do you construct it, right? I mean, the people going in there, tearing things down and restructuring the building.
All right, look, can I ask you about Kellogg? So this document says just explain to me the difference between the construction cost and the project cost. Again, that's the same thing you're talking about, but then you've got another line, you say renovation and addition, the construction cost is $38 million, the project cost is $56 million, and then below that you have full replacement, $32 million construction costs, project cost $44 million. What's the difference between renovate, I mean, are you not sure whether you're going to renovate or knock the whole thing down? And
no, the whole
replace?
thing's going to get knocked down.
So is the accurate number the full replacement?
Correct.
So I should just ignore the renovation and addition lines?
Yeah, I think they were just showing different options, or just to show the variance between if you build it versus renovate it. But the approved plan is to rebuild it completely.
Okay. I just would love to go through this exercise, however painful it may be, one more time. So you're saying it's going to be a $32 million construction for Kellogg, and that's going to be new construction?
The total cost is 45 million, that's what I have in front of me.
Right. I'm
And
just
the
focused on
difference
your-
is, yes, correct.
Isn't part of the difference the soft costs, or you're not including soft costs on your construction costs?
No,
No,
yeah,
that's
so
not-
soft cost and contingencies on top of that.
Can
So that's 304, so you're doing a brand new construction here for $304 at Kellogg.
That's about right, yeah.
About half the price, less than half the price of what Madison is going to cost.
Correct. I mean, we can have Jerry give the exact answer for that, but I can, in my conversation with him, and Jerry is our Chief Modernization Officer, and my name, by the way, is Yusuf Awad. I'm the Deputy CEO for the district. When I talked to Jerry about this, because, broadly, one of my questions is why it costs more to renovate than build.
Right.
And his answer is it has to do with moving the kids. And as you move the kids, you have to construct temporary stuff, which is a sunk cost in a way. So after you build it, you have to demolish it because you don't really need it. Temporary places for kids. And in Madison in particular, and it's probably true in some of our schools that we're not gutting it completely and rebuilding it. Some of that remodeling, you have to level the ground sometimes and to make adjustments in the walls and sometimes in the ceilings. So some of that kind of construction, while you're not rebuilding the whole thing, but you're making some modification that actually costs more than just eliminating the whole thing and rebuild it. And
The Lincoln project, are you proposing to expand the square footage at Lincoln?
I believe so. I believe so. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but I think that's part of the plan.
Okay. What's the current enrollment, PBS?
Total,
Yeah.
we're about 48,000 roughly.
48,000. What do your forecasts say it's going to be in 10 years?
We're expecting it to go to about 51,000 students roughly
In
in
about
5
the-
years,
in
not
5
10 years. Yeah.
Do you know 5 years after that, or you haven't?
I don't really have that number. It tend to be non-reliable after 5 years, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, we've
But
seen
one
the
can
trend in
assume-
the last 5 years. It wasn't as accurate. So
Why?
Why? Because of the migrations coming in the Pacific Northwest. And in spite of what Yusuf said about the trends, I mean, the trends are saying we're going up in population.
Okay. Thanks.
Tom, how did we get from a place where the board, I think just prior to your coming on, was essentially ready to close Benson? I mean, Benson was capped and Benson was sort of looking like it was going to head toward ultimately not existing anymore, to now where we're going to, spend a couple $100 million to renovate it.
Well, I mean, I can tell you that this board is very passionate about career technical education and very supportive of Benson. I mean, I'm not sure I agree with your characteristics of it being capped. I'm not sure it was ever intended to be closed, but having a rebuilt, vitalized, state-of-the-art career technical high school is a priority of this board.
So we're going to have, the board before and after you joined has spent a lot of time on the high school redesign concept. We're going to end up with schools, we've got fewer than 600 kids at Jefferson, I think fewer than 900 at Roosevelt. We have some pretty small and medium-sized high schools that we're spending a lot of money on. If you go outside the city and look at Oregon City or other new builds, they're much, much larger. So could you explain the sort of thinking around economies of scale or lack of economies of scale? I mean,
Well, there is a high school redesign, and 1,700 was the number that was put forth as what these high schools would be built to, and the long-range plan calls for both rebuilding these buildings, renovating them, and then also using boundary adjustments. So maybe you were drilling at this about, okay, what's the population, how many schools do we have? And it's going to be a combination. We're going to have to use the tool of boundary adjustments to balance enrollment in these high schools. Because there's some, if Peyton Chapman had her ways, she'd build Lincoln for 4,000, right?
Why would she be wrong about that?
Well, because you have Wilson right there, which is a great school, and is existing infrastructure.
I guess the question, maybe I'm not asking it clearly, is that we have nearly as many high schools as we had when this chart that you guys have provided showing the district when we were back at 80,000 students. We closed a few high schools, but we still have a lot of high schools. If you look at Beaverton or if you look at Salem, they both got much larger high schools than we do. And it feels like basically we're saying, okay, the schools that are in place are old. So we're going to rebuild those old schools on exactly the same place for a slightly larger capacity.
So what are you suggesting?
So I'm suggesting that we have pretty small high schools. We have much smaller high schools than the other big districts in Oregon. We have in front of us a chance to rethink the way we house our high school students, but we appear to be sticking with the status quo. And I'm just wondering why we're doing that.
I can speak to this, and I'm not from here. I've been here 12 years, and I think what a lot of this has to do, from my perspective as a Madison South neighborhood person, is they're really trying to focus on people like me, people that live east of 51st. That we could say, let's do small schools, and if we did our larger schools, and then the adverse impact would fall on the people that always falls on: Black people, Hispanic people, and Asian people. We'd be crowded in big, huge schools with very few resources, and we'd get what we got, which is Lincoln doing well, asking that they need more space, people using fake addresses to get there, people using fake addresses to go where they want, and it would continue to be the same mess. I think that what this does, it allows schools that have been seeing people leave, right, white flight, and it would, with getting rid of the school transfers, it would allow these schools to get those communities back, get some stability, build robust programming, and attract people to the community that will stay there.
Yeah, and I think you have. All these things are a balancing act, and you have existing schools, you have existing communities. This was in the high school redesign not so long ago, pretty well hashed out by the community. And if you go out towards 30 years from now, we'll have these high schools, and there'll be boundary adjustments will be the balancing act.
The effect on property taxes for, I don't know what's an average home in Portland, but what?
It's 140 for the first 4 years. Average life of the bond will be 68 cents.
68 cents per thousand?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when you determine to raise however much money this is, typically what happens is you go out and you try to determine what's the appetite for me raising my taxes. That I'm willing to pay $300, but not $325, right? I assume you did that.
Mm-hmm.
And you determine that the amount for an average house, whatever that amounts to.
Still about 200,000 according to Multnomah County.
I'm sorry?
200,000 assessed value.
I'm sorry,
The average assessed value in Multnomah County is $212,000.
Oh, okay. And so the consequence of this measure on that $212,000 house would be how much?
About $232 a year.
Okay. And so when you went out and polled, you found some tolerance for this figure, but not for 236 or whatever?
Yes.
Okay. So had it been higher, you might have, I mean, I can't imagine you're saying that we're done.
Well, I mean, when we did the survey, there was 3 figures there that we have used, and one of them, I believe it was $850 million, if we to go for 850 million, and I think the second number was close to 750, and the third one was, I think it was 650.